So thank you very much, everyone. My name is Glenn Osaki. I work at USC. I work in international communications and marketing, and have been involved in a number of different things. But more relevant for this audience, I serve on the Little Tokyo Business Association board. So thank you all very much for participating. And we have a very special treat today because we are going to have some success stories from two family businesses that were founded in Little Tokyo decades and generations ago. And these two businesses are among the best known, most respected, and most influential companies in the community. And these two companies actually represent over 200 years of experience and devotion to Little Tokyo between the two of them. So I'm going to start by just giving you some brief bios of both Kelsey and Brian, and then we're going to show a video before we kick off into our panel conversation. So the first person to my left is Kelsey Kawana. Kelsey is the vice president and fourth generation family operator of JSL Foods, the largest Asian cooked noodle and wrapper manufacturer in America. The company started in 1938 when Kelsey's great-grandparents established the Yamasa Kamaboko business. Kelsey also manages corporate strategy for a new import venture with Japan's largest food distributor for grocery stores and restaurants across the US. And I think she'll talk to us a little bit about that. And then when not making noodles, Kelsey runs Dachi, a Japanese snack vending machine business that she founded with her sisters. She writes and produces short documentaries, narrative films, and commercials as well under her Someday Films banner. So Kelsey is a very busy person. She also holds some financial security licenses. She has BAs in business and entrepreneurship and East Asian studies from Brown, and an MBA from the UCLA Anderson School of Management. Finally, she's a John Wooden Global Leadership Fellow and winner of the Gloria Appel Prize for Entrepreneurship. Why don't we all give a warm welcome to Kelsey Kawana. And then on the end, to Kelsey's left, is Brian Kito. Most of you probably know Brian. He is the third generation owner of Fugetsu-Do, a Little Tokyo confectionery shop that opened in 1903, and it is the oldest business in Little Tokyo. Through his mochi and manju, he has contributed to an appreciation of Japanese traditions and culture among Americans. Aside from his success as a businessman, Brian has been instrumental in the well-being and safety of Little Tokyo. Through a special appointment by the Japanese Chamber of Commerce of Southern California and LTBA, he was appointed vice president of the Little Tokyo Public Safety Association in 1991 and rose to president in 2001 and has held that position ever since. He opened the Little Tokyo Koban, an LAPD substation, in 1996 with the help of community business volunteers in the city of LA, and later helped found the LA Tanabata Festival as part of Nisei Week. In addition, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, but Brian has been awarded commendation from the Foreign Ministry of Japan in 2004, and then in 2020, he received the very prestigious Order of the Rising Sun Gold and Silver Rays for promoting friendship and mutual understanding between Japan and the United States. He's also honored for contributing to disaster relief fundraising following the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake. And on top of that, he teaches manju making to kids and has been invited by the Pat Brown Institute of Public Affairs to help train law enforcement officers in community-based policing. And I'll be interested in finding a bit more about that from Brian. So you could see that we have two really wonderful individuals, tremendous experience, tremendous devotion, and I think we all can learn quite a lot from them. Let's give them a warm welcome again, and thank you for joining. So the way that we're going to do today's session is I'm going to show quick little video clips of each of their businesses, just to give you guys a chance to understand a bit about their history, about their business, and then we'll dive more deeply into a conversation that I will moderate. So if we could show the first video for JSL Foods.
When you talk about family businesses, I think foundations is a very good way to describe how each generation builds. Our foundation really started in 1938 with my grandfather, who started a kamaboko business in Los Angeles. Most first-generation immigrants, you work hard. You spend a lot of hours and you keep your head down. And then after the end of the year, you take a look up and if you have a couple of dollars in your pocket, that's a great year. And that's how my grandfather ran our business. And it wasn't until my father, who took over, really took our business and really became a kind of a visionary for our company to expand. And he is the one who laid a foundation of growth in different types of food manufacturing.
When it comes to maintaining the same level of drive and dedication that the prior generations had, it's very important to call out and name those values which define the leadership and which define the culture. And so those values for us are innovation, quality and performance, customer service, and a sense of family spirit. Well, I think it's really exciting because in this day and age with social media, everyone's a home chef. And everyone has a food channel. And everyone has access to traditional recipes that prior to today and the advent of the internet, no one really had access to unless you traveled. And so it's a very exciting time to see individuals embrace authenticity, but also experiment with fusion, also experiment with what rings true to them and what they enjoy eating. It's just going to continue to be a very exciting time for Asian cuisine as individuals continue to play around with it, to discover and to trial new products.
And next we'll show the video for Fugetsu-Do.
I want to say there's only 2 people in Tokyo that are third-generation owners of their business. And one's a mortician and the other is me. Well, Fugetsu-Do is a Japanese confectionery. We specialize in mochi. We are a family-owned business. You look at the generations of employees that work for us and how all these employees have become part of the family. But the store itself has this overlying passion to exist. It wants to survive, and that's why it's still here. It's not just a little candy store. It has connections to our culture and to our religion. Grandpa had gone to Tokyo from Gifu and studied how to make Japanese pastries under a company named Fugetsu-Do. Same name, but back in those days, there were many stores named Fugetsu-Do. They are all different owners at the time, but they all used the word synonymous with wagashi store or mochi store. There are 2 basic kinds of pastries that we make, which is all under the name of wagashi. It's either manju or mochigashi. Manju is made with cake flour, so that's yaki manju. The one that's baked, we call that kuri manju. Mochigashi, on the other hand, is made with sweet rice flour or rice flour, and it generally has a sweet bean paste inside of it. So, uguisu mochi, kusa mochi, pink mochi, and then to trick you all together, after that, we have one that's called kuzu manju. It's heated and steamed, but it has no cake flour in it, so there's exceptions here and there. Yeah. My grandfather was the first Japanese confectioner in the United States. This one cracker that he made, it was sweet. He'd fold it up like a taco, and put a paper haiku poem inside, and then bend the sides down. And that's the predecessor to what we know as the fortune cookie. In 1903, my grandfather and my grandmother, they opened a store. You know, they settled here because it was an area that nobody wanted to develop. Back in the day, this is the only place you can get Japanese food. You didn't get tofu at Ralph's Market. You didn't get, you didn't get mochi at, Vaughn's. This community was just forming. And Grandma had this reputation of welcoming people at the port. And my father kind of has the same. I've heard stories from younger first-generation Japanese men that met my father in the bars, and that my dad took him under his wing, tried to teach him how to adapt to the United States. I guess that's where I get it. It's been passed down to our family to be very helpful and be kind to those that need help.
Great. Thank you both for sharing those wonderful videos about your family businesses and the history. And so I want to start, I'm going to start kind of in the beginning. I'll go to Kelsey first. And if you could, Kelsey, just give a brief explanation about the history, this entrepreneurial journey, and the previous generations that have preceded to where you are today.
Sure. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks so much for coming. So JSL Foods really started as a venture in the 1950s. It was a grand idea, one of many of my grandfather's, that it was just around the time consumers were starting to look for outside maybe the traditional Little Tokyo community, and felt like, you know what, maybe we're not quite there yet, but someday people are going to be looking for Asian noodles, and it's going to be mainstream. It's not just going to be in our community, so we have to be ready for that. And it was around that time that he started this venture of JSL Foods out of Yamasa, which was our first family business, started in 1938 right here in Stanford Avenue, which was a Japanese kamaboko manufacturing company. In the 50s, decided to expand that into noodles and wrappers. A couple decades later, expanding that into grains and USDA kits, meal kits, and things of that sort. So I think through the generations, maybe part of the family fabric, that each generation adds a little flavor, something that they think the American consumer is going to be ready for, and push that into the fabric of the company.
That's great. Brian, how about with you in terms of the journey of Fugetsu-Do? So in the video it says your grandfather started to your father, now you, and you have another next generation as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the journey for Fugetsu-Do has been a very interesting one. Like I think I spoke to you before was, we're at 121 years, and how does any one business even go that far? And if you go up the street, you're going to see a small little store. It's not much bigger than it originally started, except there's a lot more factory in the back than it was before. But I always look back at the days that, Grandpa had to go through. He went through the Great Depression. My father had to go through World War II, the evacuation, closing the store, and then restarting the store again after World War II, coming out of camps. When I took over the store, I thought, I asked my dad what would be long enough, and, if I wanted to change careers, I wasn't all that sure I wanted to make manju for the rest of my life. And if I did have a change of heart, what could I do? I mean, what was long enough for my father to satisfy him, because I was going to be taking it from him. And so I said, it's 10 years or 15 years. And then we said, what about the 100th anniversary? And I figure I would be 47 years old, and I would be able to still have time to start another career. And believe it or not, he says, yeah, 100 years, long enough. And so I said, okay, well, that's my target. And So when we got to the 100th anniversary, I thought I was going to change careers. If you remember Little Tokyo from about 92 until maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, it was pretty depressed. And so it was a struggle. We had a lot of competition in the market. And there wasn't a lot to tell me that I have to keep going, except for one thing, was the spirit of the store and the family, the family connection to the store and its history. And so after the 100th anniversary, I continued and I kept going. And for some reason, I got paid back, here in the last 5, 6 years throughout COVID. This store just took off. And thank God it's happened just before I was going to retire. But another thing, too, is really interesting is that, I don't know if you know Kelsey, but we have a long history of doing business together. Kelsey's father, our grandfather, and my father, and along with the Pacific California Fish Company across the street, and the produce company, and the tofu, Hinoichi Tofu, in order for them to be able to ship stuff next day on an air container, they had to combine all their products so that they could fill a container and send it economically to Chicago, to New York. And we've been doing this as far as I can remember. When I first started driving, I was 16, so you were talking more than 50 years ago. And we've continued, and we still deliver once a week to Yamasa to put a shipment together that goes up to Hayward, to Tokyo Fish. So I don't know if you knew that still, but it's still going. And we've had this connection for at least 50 to 60 years.
That's a great anecdote. I love the fact that teamwork and that sense of community and working together has helped your business to succeed. Kelsey, with JSL Foods, I know that you've brought some newer ideas and new thinking to it. You mentioned how each generation kind of does something different or something new. And I was really interested about the work you do in business planning as well as the values. Is something you want to share about either of those elements of the store, the company, I mean?
Yes, thank you so much. So I think a lot of those in family business, you hear the stats to get to a third generation business from the second generation is only about 13%, and to get to the fourth generation, only about 4% of family businesses make it to the fourth generation. So it really does require the freedom from the prior generation given to the next generation to bring in new ideas and get a little bit more connected with the global business community at that time. So, when I first joined about 5 years ago, in speaking with my father, actually it's kind of funny. He said, well, what do you think you would do? What do you think your title would be? And I said, well, maybe something like corporate strategy. And he said, mm-hmm. And what is that? What are you going to be doing exactly? And so, we took it day by day. And in the first year, we really focused on 3 key things. The first thing we focused on, and something that we're both a firm believer in, when you're looking at a large issue in business, whatever it is, you don't know where to start, it's so overwhelming, there's so many components, start with people. Always start with people. And so the first thing we did was take a look at our org chart. We had to build it first. Build the org chart, look at it, take a look at all of the seats we wanted to fill in the next 5 years that didn't currently exist, and all of the key talent that we had in-house. And try to identify, how do we get the right people in the right seat, give them the right tools. If we need to bring someone else in, how do we identify that right candidate? Because unless everyone is in the right seat, firing on all cylinders, you're never going to get this behemoth of a company to move in any which direction you choose. So that was the first thing we did, was a really deep dive into our people, and that's an exercise that we do once a year. It's always helpful. The second thing we did, and it was highlighted a little bit in our video, was talk internally with our senior management all about what pillars of culture were really important to us, what we wanted to see in the company, and what we wanted the company to feel like if you came in for a visit. And so we identified those pillars of culture, and the way that we built it into the fabric of our company was we developed a new internal review process. So every year, every employee, including myself, sit down with our manager. We come up with some objectives at the beginning of the year, each one matching each pillar of culture. We have a mid-year check-in, and then we have a year-end review. And that year-end review really is a time and place for each employee to identify what they contributed to the company throughout the year in those key areas of culture. And we do it based on culture. We don't do it based on anything else. This is what really helps us build that fabric slowly over time. And the third thing we did was lay out a 5-year plan. It was the first time we had ever done that in the company's history, and it was a little bit of a daunting task. What's going to happen in 5 years? I don't know. Neither did my dad, but it's still an important exercise to vision, to think, where do I want to be, and what are all of the key components that are going to get us there. Some of that is lending, some of that is revenue planning, and some of it is, getting our act together and managing through financial statements, which we didn't used to do, but is ultimately incredibly helpful. Because if you look at a piece of paper and you ask the question why, you're going to then have to find out that answer for yourself, and then you're going to improve. So day over day, year over year, those are some of the things we worked on.
Very important lessons there. Brian, I want to go back a little bit to the comments that you had made a little bit earlier. And when we spoke, you shared some things about building upon trust. And you mentioned that, for a retail business, like each of the businesses that are here in Little Tokyo, have a bit of an obligation, and they bring customers to the community. What do you think about that culture and that role that each of the businesses, including yours, plays within this community and helping one another?
Well, the success of Little Tokyo's economy is very dependent on all of us working together. Well, not all, but most of us. And growing up and living in Little Tokyo for many years, and I probably spent more waking hours in Little Tokyo than anywhere else. But I can see where, how we've worked together to solve problems, and also is to support other organizations. Through our bakery, we can be able to help fundraising. We can help just donating to events and things like that. And in turn, I've been very active with nonprofit too. So I've worked that angle also. So I've got kind of like many hats that I have to wear. But when it really comes down to it, it all generally benefits my business. Being out there and being generous with the rest of the community. And then now, during COVID, since the business took off so strongly, it's actually drawing people to Little Tokyo. And so now it's time for the other businesses, the retailers, to take advantage of that, pick the game up a little higher. If you've got that opportunity to be able to draw people to an area, then hopefully your neighbors will also score on it too. And that's kind of how I see it.
It's a very good viewpoint, and I think that, you kind of scratch each other's back, and if you're able to run a good business and you get good customers, then they'll come back and they'll visit the others in the area. Let's see, Kelsey, so you were talking about culture, you talked about people, you talked about this business plan. What are some of the newer things that you're working on? Like if you can share what might be in your next 5-year plan or some of your newer ideas. And because I think that ability to be innovative and to always think about, well, what's next and how can we refine our business model or our offerings is something that many in the audience would also be at a place where they want to think about it, or they want some ideas.
Absolutely. So one question we always ask ourselves is, at the beginning of every year, how are consumers changing this year? What are consumers going to want 5 years from now? Because the truth of the matter is the same type of consumer that JSL Foods had 20 years ago is absolutely not the same customer that we have today. So being a global citizen and doing that research and being aware, it's incredibly important, especially in the food industry, because food consumption tastes change all the time. So one of the things that my dad and I started recognizing a couple of years ago, two things. One is that not only is the traditional American consumer, and I'm not talking about California, but even in the Midwest, you know, those consumers 20 years ago maybe didn't even know what ramen was. Today, they know the difference between tonkotsu ramen and miso ramen, and they want to queue up and get exactly what they want. So for us, you know, the consumer is so much more educated in this day and age, and they also respect authenticity. One of the things that we realized we had was all of these inroads into national food service customer chains, restaurants, and grocery stores. And we have been supplying noodles and wrappers for many years. Well, what if we supplied something else? What if we supplied goods that you can find in a Japanese convenience store in any AM PM in Tokyo to the same consumers that we sell to today with a little tweak here, maybe a packaging difference? Maybe that consumer is ready for more. On the flip side, because my dad and I have been spending so much time in Japan as well, we're recognizing that, of course, the Japanese population in Japan, about 35 to 40% of the population is 60 or over. So the aging that's occurring in Japan means that all of those businesses, all of those manufacturers are looking for a new subset of customers to grow. So we thought, you know what, why don't we put these two things together? We have relationships in Japan. We can identify a consortium of manufacturers that are looking to do something a little custom, maybe a little more entrepreneurial, and we can funnel that through our existing customer base. It's an opportunity to grow without a lot of capital expense, because as you know, in manufacturing or in retail, it just takes so long to get a loan, to do the build up, to identify new equipment, and finally to get to the customer. So that's a little bit, a section of our next 5-year plan. I think something we're excited about.
Sounds exciting. Okay, so Brian, so you were talking about the business now seems to be doing pretty well. Things you mentioned that things are picking up, and as Little Tokyo goes, so your business, and kind of vice versa. But it hasn't always been that way. There may be people here that are wondering, do I stick it out? Or do I try something different? What would you say about perseverance? Because you mentioned, at one point the 100th anniversary would come and maybe you would change businesses. But in your case, you stuck it out and you're seeing some good success now. But can you tell us a little bit about some of those times and those struggles and what really kept you going to where we are today?
Well, if you remember Little Tokyo back in the 90s, like around the time Rodney King riots, and even prior to that, this area was quite depressed at one point, especially after Rodney King riots. It took Little Tokyo close to about 15 years to recover. And during that time, of course, I have a wholesale business too. So, of course, that was advantage for me to stay in Little Tokyo because I was still able to sell to markets, Japanese, like Marukai and Nijiya and Mitsuwa. So I had a secondary out. But I think if I hadn't, it would have been very much more difficult. And we had plenty of competition with very small market. And just like Kelsey, currently our market is expanding. We have a whole new life cycle here, which started probably about right in the middle of COVID. We went viral in 2019 or 2020, and it's been very inspiring because now our customer base used to be probably 80% Asian American. Currently, if you look at the line on Saturday and Sundays, you're lucky if you see 1 out of 10 that are Asian. The rest is all different walks of life. We're at a crossroads, and I spoke with your dad at one point, and I know exactly kind of where we're at right now. The automation that's moving in for us. Luckily, we did it just at the right time, and now we're kind of expanding on it. I think, though, I'm at the end of my road, kind of like where your dad is. It's kind of like hopefully just watching and let it run. But my son Corey, you want to stand there so that everybody can identify? Right there. So Corey's been apprenticing with our shop. Does he really need the skills of hand skills and things that we're teaching him now? I believe so that he understands what a good quality product is. But he's actually at a crossroad right now with the store because we are growing at a crazy amount. We just opened up a new facility out in Gardena. Not as big as JSL Foods, but it's quite an expansion for us. It's almost doubles the size of what we can do. So I think we've been very fortunate, and the perseverance through the bad times. Hopefully and inspiringly, it's come through now, and it was a tough road, but like I said before, I try to compare it to what my grandfather went through or my dad went through, and you can't get any sympathy for what I'm going through compared to what they went through, and so it'll be interesting what my son will end up thinking about the business in the future.
Great. And just a quick follow-up. So you said 2019, 20, around this pandemic period that you kind of discovered this new life cycle and things went viral, and now you have customers that are from all walks, all ethnicities. Is there something that happened that you did or you took advantage of, or why? Is it just luck, the spirit of the store? Like, how did this happen? It's exciting, and if you can capture that, I'm sure everyone would like to benefit.
I don't know. I've been at the store now for 50 years, and after 50 years of going through the grind, sometimes you get kind of instinctive of what's happening or a feel for what the store is doing. You also get instinctive about the employees that you have. I'm not as scientific as you guys, but I hope to be. I hope my son is someday. But it's very encouraging to what's going on now. And I think the store has some very good lifespan still in it. And the best is, I hope, yet to come.
Great. Those are encouraging words, and we certainly hope that the best is yet to come. Kelsey, let me ask you about other things that are yet to come, or maybe some of your other entrepreneurial ventures, because I mentioned in the introduction of a small business that you've started that has a different new channel. What do you think about that type of innovation or entrepreneurial interest that you have?
So about 2 years ago, my sisters and I started a small business based on our love of Japanese vending machines. We remember as children going to Japan and wow, there's one on every corner. They never fail, they never get stuck, and everything comes out perfectly. So it was something that was really, in the fabric of our culture. But through business school, put together this idea to start what is now known as Dachi, which is a Japanese snack and vending machine company. We're putting machines primarily in college campuses and hospitals, both locations that have, you kind of need a landlocked population, and then you need someone who appreciates a good snack and beverage here and there. But I think overall what the process has really taught me personally is that I have the experience of going all the way back to the beginning and building up something from nothing. And I think that experience, it is modeled, especially in family business, and it's definitely something where you can identify lessons from any path of life and still retain a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit. But doing it in person, really get a feel for what it is that my great-grandparents went through, what is it my grandparents went through in having an idea and nothing but that, and trying to make something out of it. So I think all in all, it's just been a good lesson, good kick in the pants for me to experience that and bring some of those lessons, mostly kind of about grit and just continuing on into what we do at JSL, which of course is a much larger operation, but you need that core, that fuel.
Absolutely, you definitely do. Um, let's see. So the previous session, the panel discussion, there was a lot of talk about financial resources and funding that's available and things like that. And Brian, we spoke a little bit about this the other day. What is your perspective on some of the financial services, Japanese Americans wanting the assistance or not, like the businesses? What do you think are the opportunities for folks to take advantage of, like the banks and the different resources and the federal government? Or do you have, is that something that you've pursued or that you have a point of view about?
You know, I really don't know the answer to that very well, but you know, knowing that the SBA was here today, and at one facility I was looking at, I was considering a large outlay, and I was going to go working through SBA, and I don't know if our forefathers, like in our family, my grandfather, especially my father, had that type of perception of using financial institutions to its fullest, nor even touching government side. Um, it was just one of those things, I think, for that generation that came out of the camps that did not take advantage readily of things that are available through government. Not to say that there was a lot available for Asian Americans back then, but I'm hoping that, you know, nowadays it's easier to see it. For my generation, my son's generation, is to be more accepting to it. I think the older generation was much more resistant to it. But financial institutions, I mean, if you remember, we used to have Japanese banks here back in the day, and that gave some comfort zone to actually extending out credit and stuff like that. But in general, I think my father and my grandfather's generation were a little bit more reserved about going and extending themselves out. And I think that's kind of why the store proceeded the way it did. And like I said, in our situation, I think we're at a turning point here. And hopefully, maybe in the future generation, we can take more advantage of government type opportunities and the financial institutions and use them more to our advantage. I mean, you know, it's always been one of those things is, you know, having debt was not considered a good thing from the older generations. And we call it leverage now, but, you know, leverage or debt, you know, but I think culturally, I think we're getting past that. Yeah.
Kelsey, I'll just pose that similar question because I know your perspective might be different. You have securities licenses, so you give financial advice. What do you think about businesses that are here that have these opportunities and are debating whether or not to pursue them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the same thing, actually, that about 5 years ago, we were in a similar situation, you know, debt, leveraging, seeing that number grow a little bit higher on the balance sheet. I mean, this is kind of uncomfortable. But, you know, at the end of the day, if there is a venture or if there's a new product line or if there's a new facility or something that's going to fuel your future growth, I mean, I think even one of the lenders said it in the prior panel, you need to start building those inroads before you absolutely need them. And if there's one thing that we would prioritize and we would counsel others to prioritize every single year without fail is your own growth. You know, bet on yourself. And if you have identified a path forward and you think that that's going to help your business succeed into the next 5-10 years, absolutely, I think finding a way to make that happen is of the utmost priority because energy begets energy. You know, you have a little bit, you got a lot. And so, you know, I would say we're probably in a similar situation, trying to propel to that next generation and trying to identify what's going to get us there. Financing is such an important component of that.
Thank you. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask Brian and Kelsey another question. But please be thinking about any questions that you guys have, and we'll try to take a question or two from the audience. So I'd like to ask Kelsey and Brian each just to share a final piece of advice. I mean, your companies have been through a lot. You've been through good times and bad. You've had different needs to innovate. Brian, in particular, as a retail business in Little Tokyo, yeah, you've had to do a lot in the area of community policing, and you've done so much to preserve and protect Little Tokyo. So, given that, what would be the last words that you might want to share in terms of advice or insights from your experience?
Yeah, I guess, it's always been like a gamble. Of course, doing business is a gamble, and it's not for the light at heart. And of course, perseverance is a key. But rolling the dice sometimes is a calculation first. And but if you're willing to work hard, but if you're not willing to work hard, don't bother. Don't bother to try. It's only just it would create just disaster. But if you're willing to put the effort in and work hard, I think our store lasting 121 years, where most of the years of its success has come from very, very hard work, physically hard work. And so I think, you can make it in a business if you have a partially good idea, and better if you have a good idea. But if you're willing to work it, you're going to learn along the way. So, and also too, as I want to say, I want to hire Kelsey for my company. But anyway, I think that would be my best advice is, yes, if it's always good if you know how to work, and you have to have a little stubbornness and a little gamble in you.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. Kelsey, final advice from you?
Yeah, I would share two pieces of advice. The first is actually from a small book that lived on my grandfather's desk for many years, and we found by accident while cleaning out his things a couple months ago. And he had bookmarked this one page, and the page said, a true executive is someone who makes decisions quickly and is right sometimes. And I think that's that's old school, but it still rings true today. I mean, I think you can't be afraid to make a decision. You can't be afraid to say, I have conviction in what I believe in. I'm going to forge ahead with this decision, be it right or wrong. I'm going to own it, and I'm just going to keep moving forward. The worst decision is not doing anything. And then I would say a second piece of advice is what I call the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule basically states that you have so much of your day-to-day operational problems, your people headaches, your customer headaches, your complaints, that it's easy to wrap up 100% of your time in just getting through the day-to-day. But as much as possible, try to reframe each day into 80-20. For every 80% of the time that you're spending on your day-to-day problems, try and spend 20% on visioning. For every 80% of the time that you're spending with all of your key people that you meet with and talk to every day, 20% of the time, try meeting with everyone else in the company, everyone else who's putting in those hours and wants to have some face time. For every 80% of the time that you're doing, something that you would otherwise get wrapped up in, try to pull out 20% to think about the future. And that's what I would say.
I love that 80-20 rule. Thank you very much. Thank you both for your time. And I'm going to open it up to see if we have time for, maybe one question. Is there anyone that has any? Yes. Mm-hmm. So, I guess for both of you, it's about your legacy, your personal legacy, and how do you craft for the future?
How do I, I'm sorry, try that again? That's an interesting one with my son sitting here. Um, I would hope that, he's already learned probably a good 80% of what it takes. He's 23 now, but he's been in the shop since he was a child, and he knows his way around and stuff. Um, I hope my legacy would be that I kept it going. I kept the foundation going. At this point, that I've created a next step, and that next step is there and it's solid, and that it's time when he goes for the next step or the next step after that, that will be his legacy. But part of my success is his legacy too. So that's what I would say.
Kelsey, how about you and your legacy or the legacy of the company?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think it's a catch-22. If you think too much about your own legacy, then you're not spending the time necessary to create it. I think that the style of leadership that my dad has always espoused and my grandfather before him is that you're never too important to be the change you wish to see in the company. There's no job that should be beneath you. All of it is learning, and all of it is part of the legacy of the company. So I think the way that I look at it and think about is, if someone like Steve Jobs can run his independent company and still have his passion project, Pixar, and if someone like Elon Musk can run his company and still have his passion project, then why can't any of us in this room do the same? Hold on to the legacy and the tradition or whatever it is that you're a part of, and still have room for those things that make you passionate, whether that be in the same business, whether that be outside the business. But I think it's really all about making the most out of the time that you have, and maybe not worrying so much about how you'll be remembered.
Yeah, very, very wise advice from a young professional, maybe very, very experienced. Thank you very much for that. I think we are at time. If anyone had one last question, we might be able to take it. But yes, we'll take this last question, and then we'll break down for the next session.
So what's the best way to navigate? What's the best way to navigate from an older generation to a younger generation? Because I know that sometimes the older generation doesn't want to incorporate the younger generation's ideas. So what's the best way you can navigate that?
I'm very fortunate, but both my father and my grandfather always had a similar philosophy, and they visualized it in the same way. And the visualization that they used is, when the next generation comes along, they're just a seedling in the forest. They're just a small tree. And there's no way for that tree to grow and to be nurtured and to eventually have its own say and hold its own weight if the other trees cannot clear for that younger tree. And so, I think part of it is the ability, at least from my side, in my experience, is that on day one, when I came in and sat down at my father's desk and we started planning out what we were going to do for my first year, he told me that go ahead and make your own mistakes. I'm not going to try to stop you, and I'm not going to try to take away the learning opportunity that comes from making mistakes, because my father didn't do that for me. And so, for better or worse, I think it's really about giving that next generation the freedom to make mistakes and not holding them to some standards that maybe a founder wouldn't have been held to, because that's the only way that you learn.
Well, so I was the third generation, and I still recall how tough it was going through the transition from father to son, and of course I'm going through that currently, and it's not an easy thing, and you can understand why the percentages are so low. My son would represent the fourth generation. But I think we look good. We look a lot better than, what did you say, 4%? 4%. I think we're part of that 4%. And I think learning from my experiences with my dad, I hope to think that I am not making the same mistakes that he did with me. But I could be wrong. But I'll try my best to, like you said, let him make his own mistakes. But again, that he be accountable for those, that he take responsibility for those, and that's the only way to learn. And also, if it is learning toward a mistake, how to fix it, and that's the real key for a father to pass it on to their sibling. I mean, their child. It's about their safety that we're most worried about. Financial safety, their mental safety. We work crazy hard during the holidays. We're seasonal. Sometimes it is dangerous. We're picking up stuff that we shouldn't be picking up by hand. We should be using machinery. So I hope this. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I've told people many times, but it's so gratifying after you finally get the full responsibility and it's on you. And I'm hoping that this will carry on again to my son.
Wow. Well, these are great words on two amazing success stories from two amazing business leaders. So let's all thank them very warmly for taking the time. Our final panel is on marketing, and it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Suprani May. Suprani is experienced entrepreneur and small business counselor with more than 2 decades of diverse professional experience. Suprani has managed multi-million-dollar operations, spearheaded project implementations, and excelled as an individual contributor. For the past 8 years, Suprani has passionately dedicated herself to the role of small business counselor. Her expertise in business development fuels a deep commitment to empowering entrepreneurs, guiding them to establish thriving businesses and achieve both short-term success and long-term economic well-being. Please join me in welcoming Suprani.